Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the UAS drone security series.
I'm back!
So a lot has happened, and I appreciate your patience. If you've been waiting for this, and wondering what happened. We'll get onto that in a little bit. But essentially, the series is back. We're back in full swing, and we hope you'll stay tuned for it. So just to go over who I am, just quickly, I'm going to go into full detail, but essentially I'm a volunteer and board member at the Aerospace Village. Used to be in the British Army, and progressed through my career into the niche of aviation cybersecurity, with a focus on the operator side rather than any of the avionics. However, COVID really affected the airline industry, and that's also affected my employment and led to a break, which is what led to this series, because I lost access to all aircraft and resources and everything else, and the knowledge base that I was using for my own personal research. And I decided, well, I can't afford an aircraft, but I can afford a drone. So let's buy one, build one, look into it, and see what we can find. And the key thing is there, as you can see in the bottom, is, and that was the reason for the disruption. I had talked about it in previous episodes. I've changed countries. So yes, I now live in the States, in my sweet home, Chicago. As you can see there, beautiful day, taking there of Montrose Harbor. I've always loved Chicago, been here many, many times. And there were many personal reasons for making the switch to America and to Chicago. Very few not to take the change. My wife is American, for those who don't know, and she had lived in the UK for quite a while because of me. I was joining the army when we met in France, and she moved to the UK for me. It wasn't her first choice, and I thought, well, it's a pretty good idea to repay the favor. But a lot of things have happened there. I've actually started working for the same airline that she works, so I'm back in aviation security. So it means I have access to all of those resources and more now, because the scale is so much larger. It's proving a big challenge. I actually work in a team which is larger than the entire cyber team of my previous job, and all we do is aviation cyber, which is absolutely fantastic to see the importance and the resource being poured into it. But anyway, enough about that. I'm sure that we talked about that at DEF CON and elsewhere as to what we're doing. But it's really, really good, and really good to see. So just to go over the episodes that have come before. So we've gone through building a drone from the airframe to the electronics. We've talked about safety and regulations in both the UK and the US, and I take this moment to apologize to guys in the UK. My focus on the UK regulations may dwindle somewhat because I'm really focused on the US regulations right now, for good reason, which I'll come on to later. But that doesn't mean I'm going to completely disregard them. I think there are some changes coming in which are going to be really interesting to dig into, but we'll come on to those at some other point, not today. One thing I did notice going through these episodes is that I promised you a launch of the episode 5 there, which was discussing the Mavlink protocol weaknesses that I had presented at the RSA conference a couple of years back, and I never did that. So in the coming week or so, I'm going to launch that on our YouTube channel, and I'll provide a link to that in the description below. And then for DEF CON 2 years ago, I then talked about not hacking UAS, but hacking UAS. And for those who may be not fully aware of all abbreviations here, when I say drone, UAS, UAV, I mean the same thing. I know in the detail they have different nuances, but the terms are basically interchangeable in here. Unmanned aerial system, unmanned aerial vehicle, drone, they all kind of mean the same thing. Or when I refer to them, that's what I mean. And then, of course, this episode as well. And we'll talk about future episodes and what's planned and coming up later. So in this episode, we'll have a skirt over some new regulations on the FAA side. I had talked about it previously, but there's more detail that's come out. We'll talk about Part 107 and some updates on the UAS that I built and plans for it. And like I said, we'll talk about future episodes and where the series is going to go. And I'm going to give you a little teaser for what I've got planned for DEF CON 31. So the biggest thing, and it's making lots of noise right now, is the changes to the regulations requiring remote ID. So as of September last year, all new drones sold in the US had to be remote ID capable. Now, the requirement for operators of drones to use remote ID is not going to be effective until September 16th this year. And the rule covers, the standards covers what data should be broadcast by the remote ID module and not how. So we're seeing, modules that can be added onto drones, which are doing things via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And then drones which are also doing the same. The key thing to make sure that is very specific here, that in order to comply with the rule, ADS-B is not allowed. So you're not allowed, you're not allowed to use ADS-B on drones, and B, it does not cover the remote ID requirements. So, but we'll see some similarities between the ways that ADS-B and remote ID work, and what that means for drone security. And basically, as of September 16th this year, anybody flying a drone will have to do the remote ID compliant drone, either add a certified remote ID module or fly in what's known as a FRIA, which is an FAA recognized identification area. As far as I'm aware right now, there are no FRIAs currently in operation. The framework for approval is pretty new, so very few aero modeling clubs will have gone through this process yet. Still quite cold in Northern America, so the kind of the hobbyist season really hasn't started yet. But I expect that to change this year. And like I said, FRIAs is essentially aimed at hobbyists, universities, and what have you, to have designated and permanent areas, which are obviously identified on all of the mapping that we use, to be able to fly drones in those areas without using remote ID. So that's coming in. And of course, now, this is where the applicability of remote ID gets a little bit tricky, because the remote ID rules do not apply to drones that are below 250 grams or 0.55 pounds. However, if you fly under Part 107, which is and not flying under the recreational waiver, which is the USC 44809, then you have to use remote ID. So for example, this drone here, this is my DJI Mini 2. Love this thing. It's a great platform. However, at the moment, the firmware, I believe a firmware is upcoming, but I'm not 100% sure if it is. DJI can't really confirm or deny, which is a bit annoying. Whether an update is coming for the Mini 2. Technologically speaking, it should, there's no reason why it can't, because of the way the Wi-Fi works on this thing. But it's not there yet. And but if I want to use this recreationally from September 16th this year, I can. So that's no problem whatsoever. However, if I'm going to fly this under Part 107s for non-recreational reasons, if that firmware is not available, I'm going to have to buy a module and attach it to the drone to be compliant with the new regulations. And you'll see why that's important for my particular case later on in a moment. And also, I am, building my own custom-made drone as well. And of course, the bigger drone, the big fixed wing, I will need to buy a remote ID module for these anyway. So I'm going to be buying one of those modules later on this year. There's a few interesting things coming out that I'll cover in a later episode about remote ID. I'm going to go into detail on the subject. There's there's an open source version, which I'm not sure if it's fully compliant with the FAA regulations or if it just aligns with it, and therefore, it sits in that gray area. But some of these remote modules are essentially just a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth broadcasting module with a battery attached, sending data which you can specify and program. I don't see it being any more than ESC32 with a bit of custom software on board. But the fact that it's certified to the FAA regulations, these people are selling these modules for $300 plus, which to me just seems a bit crazy. I'm hoping that once this becomes active and people start buying more of those modules, maybe we'll see some competition between the different suppliers, and that price is going to come down. But right now, I think the price of $300 for something that essentially just broadcasts Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, is a little bit extravagant. So, however, we will be buying one anyway, whatever happens to the price, and we're going to dig into it and see what that means. So I talked about Part 107. Well, okay, so the big news is yeah, I'm doing my Part 107 course at the moment. I'm not going to talk about which provider I'm using, but it's well-known, well-trodden path. And I might reach out to them and see if they want to come and talk on this, because the person and company that does this is very passionate and has talked to other YouTube channels. So fingers crossed we can maybe get this guy on. But yes. And the reason for going through the course is essentially, if I want to take any drone footage and share it as a part of this series, it does not qualify under the recreational waiver. So I can't use that part the USC 44809 waiver because I'm not flying for purely recreational purposes. A lot of people think that the waiver applies so long as you're not getting paid, and that's not correct. So let's say, for example, I wanted to use my DJI to go and inspect the building where I now live, because it's a multi-story building. We've got, a small number of units, but, it's still too tall for a ladder. So we've had some tuck pointing work done, and I want to go and check the quality of the work. Well, I can fly my drone up. That's completely allowed under the regulations, this Class G airspace. There's nothing really there to stop me from doing it. However, that's not recreational use. There I am essentially performing a service, albeit to myself, but that's not recreational. Recreational is literally, I'm going to fly up for fun. And that's what the waiver covers. So if I'm going to take any footage and share it as a part of this channel, I will need to be Part 107 certified. Another reason for getting it is all the equipment I'm building and buying for this channel and for my own personal gratification is coming out of my own pocket. So I know this is, this channel is broadcast through the Aerospace Village, but this is all my own gear. I'm buying all of this stuff, and it's not cheap. The fixed wing drone probably has, I'm thinking, a couple of $1,000 invested in it. When this one is done, this is going to be probably close to, depends on the camera I add to it, but without the camera, probably about $1,000 into this. Camera systems, if I want to go multispectral, which is what I'm thinking for this thing, that alone is $5,000. So these things aren't cheap. And DJIs, we all know the price of DJIs. Even this little one here, is on the pricey side, albeit quite accessible to the general public. So by getting my Part 107, I can actually start to do work with my drones and to generate revenue through, I'm guessing, a listed company. I haven't figured that out yet, but yeah, I can do that to generate a bit of revenue that can help pay for these things. So that's another reason for getting it, and also my own personal, interest. I'm learning a lot that I did not realize about drones, especially under the FAA regulations. The course, I'm going to do an episode on the course and what it covers and my own experiences of it. It covers, principles of flight, which I thought I knew from my days as an air cadet, because you go through the whole thing, but how it relates to drones and multicopters was interesting. That was a part I hadn't come across because, back when I was 13 years old, years ago, we didn't really have multicopters, so I think we had a Chinook was available back then, but, it wasn't really that omnipresent to be of use to a young cadet. So they just focused on the basics of that principles of flight. So learning about that was interesting. And the course has been a bit of an eye-opener in many respects, and I'll cover that in full on a separate episode for anyone interested. So yes, some more of the reasons here. So like I said, Part 107, any usage not defined as recreational. I've covered that already. Fly for fun, you can fly under USC 44809. If you're not flying for fun, it's Part 107, whether you're getting paid or not. And then, like I said, remote ID, regardless of the UAS weight, but interestingly, I can use the same drone for recreational use if I'm flying for fun. I can just take off the remote ID module because it's below 250 grams. And actually, the interesting note, so this is even stamped on the side here as 249 grams, but I think in reality, these are about 237, so it gives a little bit of wiggle room there. I'm not sure whether the weight of a remote ID module is going to push it above the 250 grams. We shall see. And getting your Part 107, this is an interesting thing a lot of people don't realize is it does not prevent you from flying under that recreational waiver. So you can fly the same drones under the recreational waiver as long as you follow the rules of the recreational waiver. It's all about the intent of the flight, which is a key thing in laws based on, I guess, the Magna Carta from the UK, which we have here in the US as well. The US laws are very closely linked to the historical UK ones and the foundations of it. Whereas in Europe, it's a little bit different. We in Anglo-Saxon laws kind of play in intent and a little bit of gray area. Whereas some European rules, I'm not calling out any specific country here, but are very black and white. They say what you can and cannot do. So it's all about the intent is the key thing. Because as we'll cover in the Part 107, if you're flying under recreational use and something happens you did not know was going to happen, and you caught footage of that, and you wanted to sell it to a news station, flying under recreational use does not prevent you from doing that, because you did not intend to take off and film something for financial gain or non-recreational use. It just happened, So these are all things we'll get into on that episode. It's all a bit tricky, but once you lay it out flat, it's pretty clear. And the key thing about Part 107 is, everyone thinks, if you get it wrong, you go into jail. No, the FAA doesn't really work like that. So if you fly your drone, whether it's under Part 107 or under the recreational waiver, and you get it wrong because you made a mistake, then you're not going to get into trouble. You're not going to get into big trouble. The FAA may turn around and say, well, okay, you need to do some, some remedial training, or you need to consider this in future flights, or et cetera, et cetera. So they're actually really helpful about making sure that you comply properly. Now, if you fly your drone in a manner that is deliberately breaking the law, or if it is deliberately reckless, then yes, they can fine you a lot of money, and potentially even jail time as well. And the key thing is that the airspace rules here are federal laws, not local laws. So we'll get into that as well, because there's a I'm noticing here in America, the states and even local municipalities are trying to create their own laws over airspace, which is interesting. So like Millennium Park here is trying to enforce a rule. They have a rule which they're trying to enforce, which covers the airspace over Millennium Park. Now, I believe that's overreach, but we'll cover that. And if I can, I'll try and get a lawyer onto this, because it's really interesting area that over the coming years is probably going to provide a few popcorn moments for those of us on the operator side, as cities and states and the federal government kind of slug it out for authority as to what can happen in the airspace regarding drones. And then obviously key things with another key thing with the 107 is you're not restricted to Class G airspace. So you can actually right now. So living in Chicago, obviously you get to O'Hare Airport. The airspace is restricted, so you cannot fly there under a recreational waiver. However, with the Part 107, there are ways of gaining or basically submitting a flight plan. So your LANC system, which can be used to file a flight plan for a specific mission of what you want to do. And then it will go to the FAA, it will go to the local airspace authority, and they will come back with either a denial, or they may approve, with certain conditions. And what I'm hearing from people who actually have their 107 and do this work is it often comes back approved, but with additional restrictions. So they may say, well, normally you fly drones here is the maximum ceiling height is 400 above the ground, 400 feet. But they might turn around and say, well, one restriction is you can't fly 400 feet, but you can fly 130. And that's fine for your mission. If you're just doing some building photography or something, then it's unlikely you're going to have tall buildings within the space of an airport. But say you're taking photos of a house for real estate, then that's going to be fine for you, because you're probably not going to get above 80 feet. So that's the way that works as well. And you can't do that under the recreational waiver. That's why Part 107 gives you more flexibility in those regards. And like I said, you have the same height and visual line of sight restrictions. However, now you have the possibility to apply for waivers. And we're seeing this a bit more and more in terms of the beyond visual line of sight restrictions. There's a lot of work going on in the industry to test beyond visual line of sight technologies. And there's some really interesting work going on there with different companies. I'm in contact with a couple of them to try and get some more information and see if they can even come on this channel or even get to DEF CON with some of that technology. It's really interesting. But with the Part 107, like I'm saying, you now have access to waivers to work beyond that. So there are guidance documents from the FAA as to how to apply for waivers for such things as BV loss, and we'll cover those at some point as well. So I mentioned it earlier. So the drone build. So yes, in the last episode, I did talk about damage that occurred. So I made a mistake. I was over eager. This is back in the UK. There was a field identified where I could take off from a bridleway and fly over this space legally. However, I was too eager. So I've come to realize that actually operating this drone is a two-man operation. It was also in COVID, so during periods where there were restrictions about going out and mixing with people from other households. So getting a second person to help me operate the drone was not possible. I knew I was moving to the States, and I was going to have to pack this drone up in a box and get it shipped over to America. So I wanted to try and get a flight out of it and try and christen the drone, and I got over eager, and I essentially ran out of hands. So you've got to try and operate the throttle, and the thrust from this drone is immense. It's really strong. So if I put it on full throttle, I can't hold it. It's just too strong. However, you need full throttle to take off. So I was there with trying to control the throttle and holding the drone and launching it at the same time, and I just got it completely wrong. The nose went up, it stalled, spun around, landed on the tail, and as you can see there, that's the damage that occurred. Now, luckily it's foam, so it's really easy to fix. I just put some aluminium rebars in. Where are we? I put them in here. Glued it all back up, just like I did glue all these parts together, and it's absolutely fine now. So it might be a little bit more heavy in the back, probably about 5 or 10 grams, but nothing that's going to really affect the aircraft. However, looking at the spaces available for me in Chicago, looking at the spaces available for me just in America in general, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fly this drone. It may happen at some point, but there's nothing planned for it yet. But that doesn't mean we're not finished with this drone. And actually, this drone is going to come to DEF CON this year. And it's going to be a part of a couple of episodes in the future where we talk about actually hacking Mavlink using RF. The other interesting thing about the laws here in the States is that, let's say I had my own 10-acre farm and I wanted to fly my drone over there. That's fine. That's completely legal. I could fly this over there. However, I don't have a 10-acre farm, so I can't do that right now. But let's say I had one and I was flying it around and I put it on autopilot in a circle, in visual line of sight, following all the rules. If I then try and hack that drone, I am still breaking the law. So my own drone over my own property, of my own mission, the aircraft is under my control. If I then try and hack it, I'm still breaking the law. So what we need to do is to basically figure out a way how to hack the drone legally. And I've come up with this. Actually, no, sorry. I was inspired on my trip around Europe. So for those who don't follow me on Twitter, part of the reason for the hiatus was a delay in my visa. So because I work in cyber and because I've worked in aviation, the embassy decided that they needed extra background checks on me, which they said would take a couple of weeks. They ended up taking 6 months. So the house sale was going ahead. Cindy had already moved and to Chicago, and I was essentially homeless. So I bought an RV, a big American RV, and I took it on a trip around Europe. And I ended up in one place I've never been before, even when I lived in France. It was Nantes, and in Nantes they've got this awesome place where they basically recreate nature using mechanical devices. So they have like hummingbirds and spiders and an elephant that actually moves and you can ride on and stuff, and it's really, really cool. And one of the exhibits was this thing, and the photo doesn't show it that well, but essentially inside there you have a model of a biplane aircraft, and they basically do this show where they have a pilot in there and he's flying up and down, the aircraft is going up and down, and you've got a fan there on the front with smoke being blown over him, and flashing lights and what have you. And it was basically a bit of a eureka moment for me. I was like, well, actually, one place the FAA does not have jurisdiction over drones is indoors. So if I can make the drone think it's flying indoors, then the laws about hacking drones don't apply. So what I've come up with, and you can tell my wife was not home when I did this because she would not be very happy. So essentially what I've done is using some aluminum extrusions, I've created a frame, and I think it's a bit too high. I'm going to probably reduce the height a bit. And essentially what I'm going to do is suspend the drone inside this frame. And then on the front here, make some fans, 12-volt fans, which will just blow air over the control surfaces of the aircraft. And then what I need to do is to figure out, and this will be an episode on its own, I think, figure out how to emulate or spoof the GPS feed into the flight controller. So that's over UART on CAN bus. So we shall have to kind of dissect that, figure out how it works, and then make our own module, either with a Raspberry Pi or an ESC32, to emulate that. And then we can basically make the drone think it's flying anywhere in the world, but it's actually flying indoors inside a frame. So that's going to be quite interesting to figure out. But that's the platform that I'm going to use for the drone hacking exercises. And this is what's coming to DEF CON. So I might have spoiled the teaser for later on, but yeah, that's where we're going with that. And like I said, I'm also building this one here. It's going to be with a different flight controller, just to see if there are any differences between the flight control that I've got on the fixed wing, which is that RG Pilot Cube. And this is just going to be, I think I'm going to put an F5 or a Holybro on here, just see if there are any differences in the way the protocol is managed on those as opposed to the other ones. And we'll also at some point, look into hacking these guys. So they use Wi-Fi, both 2.5 and 5G. There are attacks you can do on Wi-Fi which are well known about. So we'll give those a go, which will be quite interesting. The interesting thing about the drone, the DJI drones, is they do frequency hopping. So if they notice too much interference on one channel, they will switch to other channels and move around even during the flight. And what that means for hacking, I don't know, but we'll have a look and we'll figure it out. So that's the update on the drone side. And then so coming on finally to the future episodes and where we're going to go with the series. So like I said, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to re-edit and release the episode 5, which will come soon. Apologies for not doing that before now. We'll do a Part 107 walkthrough. So I'll talk about my own experiences of going through the Part 107 process and hopefully passing the exam. And like I said, also be talking about emulating the GPS on the CAN bus. Now the ground station. So yes, I didn't talk about that. So I have been building that as well. It's essentially going to be a computer in a box with a battery. But because it's going to come with that frame to DEF CON, I need to think about transporting it. And my luggage allowance, even though I work for an airline, we do have restrictions. So I've essentially made the ground station into a custom build box with roller wheels and everything else, but it's to the maximum dimensions of a carry-on luggage. So that was a bit tricky in getting the screen to fit inside because of the tolerances on either side. But I got a screen from from online and what have you, and I'm going to start building that. So we'll do an episode on the ground station build. We're going to do an episode, like I said, on remote ID technology and what it means. So remote ID works on a similar principles as ADSB. It's not the same frequencies, it's not the same message structure, but it still is unencrypted. It's still there's still no digital signatures. So all of the receivers of remote ID, just like ADSB, will have to trust the fidelity of the signals it receives, because it's just basically an open bar on that. So the same kind of theories and attacks that are possible on ADSB, I believe, are also apply to remote ID. And what does that mean for law enforcement, for the FAA and everything else? Because remote ID was really brought in to help law enforcement keep track of illegal drone activity. can we flood the airspace with 2,000 drones and hide our own legitimate drone in the middle of that? We'll look into all these things and see what is possible and what it takes to do it. And like I said, we'll do a drone takeover using Mavlink and stronger RF, because as you'll see in episode 5, Mavlink is essentially, it works very similar to it's not going to say it's an API, but the securities around it are very similar to what you would do with an API. So as we all know, APIs, if you don't protect them, are wide open and open to everybody. But you can have API keys, which you issue to people, and that can reduce who can use it. However, unless you encrypt that traffic, people could intercept the keys going backwards or forwards, and start emulating an official user and getting unauthorized access. And Mavlink is kind of working in the same way. So, there's you can include a Mavlink 2. You can, use a pre-shared key to provide a digital signature to the traffic going forward. And there's weaknesses in the way that is applied, both in sharing the pre-shared key. It goes over RF, great, but also the digital signature, because of the size of the Mavlink packets, is truncated. So there's lots of things we'll talk about in that episode about the theoretical attacks on Mavlink, but we're going to do them in real life on that episode. And like I said, I've been in touch with a couple of commercial companies in the drone space. I'm hoping to get some of their equipment on loan to kind of play with and look at, because as we all know, like I said, if you're using Mavlink to control your drones, well, you're going to need to, as with API, you'd have maybe you send it over HTTPS or some kind of encrypted channel or dedicated channel. So the same principles of protecting Mavlink will come into effect. So, there's technologies in place with using multiple broadcast beacons and the data going over MPLS between those broadcast points. So, is there an extra layer of security on top of that Mavlink protections that is put in place by these technologies? We don't know, but hopefully I'll get into that, and maybe we can get them in to talk about that at DEF CON. If not, maybe I can do a talk about that at DEF CON once I figure out more about the technologies. One of the really interesting things is I was invited before Christmas to a BVLOS test. However, it was postponed for various reasons, and it is currently on hold. But I'm hoping once that goes ahead again, I will still be invited to go along, and hopefully that can be an episode as well. We'll talk about how they get the waiver, what they have to do in order to meet the requirements from the FAA, the technologies they use, and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be really, really interesting to do that. But like I said, it's currently on hold. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that A, it's going to get unblocked, and B, that I will be still allowed to go along. But yeah, that'll be really cool. And then the DEF CON 31 teaser, yes. So yes, the drone in the frame will be coming. And it will be a workshop where you will be able to come and do your own drone takeover yourself. So what I go through on that drone episode will be available for you guys to try out yourselves. We'll probably look at doing some remote ID spoofing as well on a closed RF environment. And I'm going to make some challenge coins for the CTFs. There's going to be a CTF as well. I'm not going to give any clues away, but they will be based on the episodes of this series. So some of the technologies, the Mavlink and everything else. There's going to be a CTF involved there, and if you complete the CTF, then yes, you will win one of the challenge coins. I'm also making a drone themed SAO for the the coveted Aerospace Village badges that go out. So those will be available, and I've got some stickers made as well which look really cool. Basically, my other drone is your drone, kind of thing, which just play on that whole my other computer is your computer thing. And so I got some of those made up. And did someone mention weather balloon? Yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but yeah, keep an eye out when you if you come to DEF CON and you come to the village, keep an eye out for those weather balloons because they are pesky and fly everywhere. Anyway, so that's it for today. As always, I shall be in the Discord channel for any Q&A. Try not to leave any comments on the video here. I don't get notifications. I can't respond to them quickly enough. So it would do you a disservice. Best thing is to get into the Discord channel. Link is in the description. And subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified of when the future episodes are coming out. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your patience, waiting for the reboot. But essentially, I'm back. Take care. See you soon.